the portion of land that they give them, I don't agree with it. You know, it's a lot of land.
If you're looking for a place to relax and be at one with nature, then you may want to consider a scenic boat ride along Antigua's northeast marine management area, the NEMA. Hundreds of miles of mangrove forest and wetland habitat provides the perfect environment for marine creatures and endangered wildlife to thrive, some of which live relatively uninterrupted among the seagrass and on the seabed. But this may not be the case for much longer. A 20-year, $2 billion special economic zone threatens to significantly pollute and negatively alter the marine environment here.
In 2015, a memorandum of understanding was signed between Chinese developer Yi Zhang and the government of Antigua and Barbuda. That agreement gave Yi Zhang permission to use 2,000 acres of land to build a state-of-the-art town that's wide enough to hold 1,500 football stadiums.
The overall development, which includes 4 offshore islands, is big enough to take up almost 3% of Antigua.
It is the largest construction project in the Caribbean, meant to create jobs and new spin-off industries, but it comes at a cost. In order to attract new investments and high-profile tourists, the developer is proposing to build 6- and 7-star hotels, factories, marinas, and upper-scale communities. But 5 years after the groundbreaking, the Yi Group has been flagged for operating without an environmental assessment, altering wetlands, removing mangroves, and mining sand and limestone without permission.
In 2014, just as residents began raising environmental concerns over the project, Environment Minister Morwen Joseph said in an interview that there would be no excuse for altering wetlands or uprooting mangroves, even with the project coming on stream.
Nobody in their right mind can make a case that we should destroy any more of our wetlands. And that's where we draw the line. No more. So all these projects that are coming, if they in any way threaten the wetlands of this country, they will not be approved.
For the most part, the government has played by the rules, but how strictly it enforces the law seems to vary. Executive Director of the Environmental Awareness Group, Arika Hill, knows all too well the gap between what's on paper and what's being practiced.
No matter the policy that is on the paper, it is not implemented by government because it does not have the pull of political will to ensure that those policies are followed. On paper, we are fantastic. And so when you read our policies, they're robust, they are well thought out, and if implemented well, they would have great impact. The issue that we have is that the policies are only implemented or only considered important by technicians.
IDA dispatched heavy-duty machinery to clear mangroves in the Narrows as the first step to build an adjoining bridge that links the mainland to the offshore island before applying for lawful permission from the chief town and country planner in charge of the Development Control Authority. The DCA issued an order for work to stop immediately, but by then workers had already demolished the remains of an Arawak village that had been on the island. Some residents, like local sea moss harvester Foster Derrick, feels that the DCA is not doing enough to uphold building laws.
The Development Control Authority, that is the authority with the final say in this whole thing, and the town and country planner is the person who has the final say. And for whatever reason, he just allows these things to go on. How it happens and how it is allowed to happen, I don't know. Why should you either be allowed to do that but locals can't do it? I don't know. A local person removing a piece of mangrove to put his boat up in it is far less an issue than either removing miles of mangrove, which he has done. I don't really know why. I know that there are a lot of people in Antigua who are very upset about it.
In August 2017, the Yi Group finally got permission to start work at the crab site on Antigua. after presenting its latest environmental impact assessment. Approval was permitted under the condition that the project be monitored by the Fisheries and the Environment Department and under the condition that YIDA preserves the NEMA, including the mangroves.
The DCA said that the developer had met the legal requirements for submission of environmental impact studies. Any previous unauthorized clearing of the landed crabs was presumably forgiven.
Clearing of mangroves is the most damaging activity to the current natural environment because mangroves provide a buffer zone against vicious storms for an island open to the yearly impacts of hurricanes.
These mangroves also support thousands of marine species. The country's Environmental Act lists wildlife that must be protected to include the rare and endemic Antigua racer snake, the critically endangered hawksbill turtle, and the vulnerable West Indian whistling duck, all of which breed and live within the NEMA. Marine biologist Rulio Camacho works with the National Parks Authority in Antigua and Barbuda and is also a member of the Environmental Awareness Group, EAG. He believes the removal of these fringing mangroves will lead to an even bigger challenge in the future. That is, the loss of entire marine ecosystems.
It's very hard to re-engineer what nature does. It's almost impossible most of the time to re-engineer what nature does, and it costs billions of dollars to try and re-engineer what nature can do on its own, naturally.
The removal of mangrove plants is illegal, and so is obstructing access to and destroying the breeding place of protected animals.
The YIDA group did not respond to our concerns, but Chief of Staff in the Prime Minister's office, Lionel Max Hurst, said mitigative measures are being taken to protect the animals. He said these include building artificial beaches on Crabs Peninsula. He said the turtles would have nesting sites that they never had before. Even with the approval of government agencies, our investigation noted that the project was off to a slow start until the government of Antigua and Barbuda wrote to the Chinese government on behalf of YIDA Zhang in order to help release some of the funds.
Since then, miles of fencing have been erected around the perimeter of crabs, blocking traditional landward access to the sea for local fishermen and sea bathers. In a fishing village less than 2 miles from the YIDA group's crab site is where more than 300 fisherfolk make a living. They catch fish which they sell to the local shops or directly to locals. The children in the community are known to use the area for recreational activity. Today, the current is a bit strong, but President of the Spear Fishermen's Association, Melvin Bid Samuel, says it is nothing compared to what he fears may happen if the group continues to dredge the channel while apathetically removing the mangrove system.
There's a dredge hidden up there in the mangrove, and if you dredge inside the reef, what you have is an increase on the drag. The drag is the pull when the water breaks over the reef and then it slides down the back. If you dredge out that, then it's going to have an effect right along the coast here, down to Jumbe Bay, maybe a little further, depends on how deep they're going down and stuff.
The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff responded to the fishers' concerns, calling it mad speculation. He said it had no basis in science, and the water currents, he said, will not, and he doesn't believe that it will ever, affect the fishers' business. Plans for the SEZ include a deep-sea fishing business, which requires a special Coast Guard body. The government's share of the profit is 10% of sales. Hurst said that he does not believe that business will affect the fishers either. In fact, he says consultation is ongoing and unceasing between the appropriate government body and the Fishers Association.
In addition, YIDA operates a quarry at its crab site, adjacent to farmlands, some of which have been in operation for generations. In July 2020, the Department of Environment stopped work when it found that workers had been illegally mining limestone without application or approval from the DCA. Before that, between 2018 and 2019, farmers reported losing thousands of dollars as pounds of dust from the quarry stifled their crops. This farmer, Genevieve Brown, is an elderly lady from the nearby community of Parham. She says the dust was so bad in the beginning that it smothered the vegetation in her fields for 3 months.
The dust was bothering us a lot. Last year, the things and them were dying with the dust. Mm-hmm.
Her only issue now is that the government has given the developer too much land. But little does she know, the problem is much bigger. In October 2019, Yida was found to be in violation of the Environmental Protection Act and the Beaches Act when its machine operators were discovered dredging sand of Maiden Island to construct 2 man-made beaches on Crabs Peninsula. Whistleblower George Wenner posted photos which showed workmen were illegally dredging the shipping channel west of Maiden Island, even after expressly being warned by the Fisheries Department not to veer off the permitted course.
All 3 government agencies, the Environment Department, the Fisheries Department, and the Development Control Authority, as well as the Cabinet of Ministers, claim to have no prior knowledge of the activity. In fact, Prime Minister Gaston Brown thanked Wenner, a member of the opposition, for what he called a very unfortunate development.
By mid-2020, the Environment Department reported in a document that 90% of the mangroves that bordered Yida's crab site had been removed. But as part of approval to begin preparatory work on site, the developer was advised early on by the Fisheries Department to keep a vegetation buffer on the coastline. This is the coastline today.
Our investigation can confirm that flamboyant trees now stand where mangroves used to be on Crabs Peninsula.
Chief Environment Officer Dan Black-Lane wrote that it is uncertain if these plants were placed there and left neglected to fend for themselves, since there are no signs of freshwater irrigation equipment where this replanting exercise is being carried out.
In June, the Environment Department said that these plants were finally showing signs of greening, but they failed to explain whether the irrigation problem had been solved.
The Nema, where this master project is expected to be constructed, is the largest declared marine protected area under the country's Fisheries Act, maintained by grants from regional and international donor agencies.
Antigua and Barbuda is a signatory on the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change, where they've pledged to protect wetlands and watersheds and to reduce greenhouse gases by the year 2030.
There was a time when we were no longer allowed to go to Maiden Island. We got stopped by security guards and we had to change our tour, which we had been doing every day, 5 days a week for 4 or 5 years. And all of a sudden, a new owner comes who starts to build things there, and we were told we were no longer allowed there. And, you know, the same thing you see happening over at Guyana Island slowly. In some instances, it's not so much them telling you can't go there, but if they rip up all the shoreline vegetation and start putting up something that looks like a prison, you know, tourists don't want to see that on an eco tour.
The Yida Group, however, continues to disregard both law and treaty by bypassing environmental regulations. The government agencies responsible for monitoring the SEZ have been tight-lipped since 2019, when Cabinet took an executive decision to enforce the civil service regulations which prevents public officers from speaking to the press without written approval. Instead of being guided by the laws, the government said that development in sensitive areas should be balanced against economic benefit. There has been no response from Prime Minister Gaston Brown or Environment Minister Malwin Joseph about the bending of regulations to accommodate the SEZ. But the government chief of staff said the operations were brought back in line anytime the government was alerted to any violations. Future plans for the Special Economic Zone includes marinas that will link the offshore islands, Guyana Island, Maiden Island, Crump Island, and Rabbit Island. Activists are particularly concerned about Guyana Island, where the country's national animal, the fallow deer, lives.
In 2012, the then United Progressive Party government specified how the lands there should be used by agreeing to establish a sustainable island resource management zoning plan. In the zoning plan, coral reefs, seagrass beds, mangroves, and wetlands are all categorized as critical environment areas where development must be strictly guided.
It is in a sensitive area that the Sustainable Island Resource Zoning Management Plan, which was parliamentally approved in, I believe it's 2012, 2011, somewhere like that, and is still used to negotiate funding for Antigua for things environmental. And it's a document that is a living document, but it is a very good document, and it was a project that was setting new ground.
Businessman Foster Derrick harvests seaweed off the coast of Seaton's, where the dredging is likely to take place. He wonders how this development will affect his business.
One of the reasons that I'm in here doing my sea moss is because it is a fully protected area, and therefore I can sustainably grow my sea moss and not affect the environment here that allows me the opportunity to have this protection, this natural protection, if you will.
The ports of entry will transport thousands of residents who live inside the permanent tax-free zone. According to the license order granted to YIDA, the zone will be free of all taxes levied in Antigua and Barbuda, and it will enjoy new concessions granted to developers outside of the zone for the lifetime of the development. Residents in the zone will also possess Antigua and Barbuda passports, the first 500 applicants in line to receive a discount on citizenship. The zone is now open to foreign investments that will complete the 20-year development.
In 2018, months after Hurricane Irma decimated the sister island of Barbuda, Prime Minister Gaston Brown urged world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly to join his country to fight climate change. Yet, back home, major developments continue to threaten that promise of change as the government continues to bend the laws meant to protect the environment and its people.
As a leader of a small island state that 2 years later is still suffering the damaging consequences of Hurricane Irma, we know and live the terrible reality of climate change. Those who continue to deny its existence cannot gainsay the massive destruction to property and loss of life that so glaringly stare them in the face year after year.
Plans for the Special Economic Zone are grand, but they do not come without significant alterations to the environment, some of which have been sanctioned by the Antigua and Barbuda government.